Hi, everyone, and welcome to PAYDIRT, a Penn State football show. This show was brought to you by our sponsors, Funk Brewing, the official craft beer partner of PAYDIRT. We're big fans of Funk Citrus IPA and Silent Disco IPA, but don't forget, our official beer, the PAYDIRT IPA, is available in Funk's tasting rooms, beer distributors, and grocery stores right now. Funk has so many great beers to choose from at their tap rooms in Emmaus, Elizabethtown, and York in Pennsylvania. You can find a variety of Funk Brewing beers at your favorite beer distributor and grocery store. Visit funkbrewing.com to learn where and how you can get their fantastic products. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, PAYDIRT is brought to you by our partners at BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports, contests, and events with first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, the NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports information, from live in-game betting to props and futures. Head to betonline.ag today or use your mobile device to join and place your first bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BLEAV50, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. PAYDIRT is presented by BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, we invite you to head to shop.believe.com, that's shop.beleav.com, and search PAYDIRT for our 2 t-shirts. One has the official show logo over the heart. It comes in white, navy blue, and black. And the other is a navy blue t-shirt. It has the PAYDIRT word mark over the heart. And on the back, circa the 2012 Penn State football season, it has Matt McGloin's name and number. It's very fitting, as this season of Nittany Lion football marks the 10-year anniversary of that team. Again, head to shop.believe.com, that's shop.beleav.com, and search PAYDIRT for our 2 t-shirts. As many of you know, here on PAYDIRT, we are all about all things Penn State Nittany Lion football. Now, obviously, we're getting you a variety of previews and recaps for all the games going on right now during the 2022 season. We've had some fantastic interviews with former Penn State football players. We're going to continue to get you those, but we also want to delve into the history and the culture, the tradition surrounding Penn State football. So I thought it was very appropriate to bring back a former classmate of mine. We overlapped. This is Ross Dew, a Penn State graduate, was there from 2005 to 2009. I was there from 2007 to 2011. And what binds us, Ross, is the fact that you and I were a part of what is now known as Nittanyville. As students, you and I were diehard Penn State football fans still to this day. But Nittanyville was once known as Paternoville. And could you explain to those who don't know what it's all about, what Paternoville/Nittanyville was and now is?
First off, Tom, it's awesome to be on the legendary PAYDIRT podcast with you.
Thanks.
So the way we came about Paternoville, so when we started, when I was a freshman in 2005, it wasn't really a thing yet, and it certainly wasn't named yet. The first game of our freshman year, myself and a few of our friends, we decided we wanted to be front row for our first ever Penn State football game to kind of experience that as students at Beaver Stadium. So we decided the best plan of action was to wake up very early on Saturday morning, walk over to the stadium, and we figured no one else will be there. We'll be the first ones in line, and we'll get to sit front row. So we walk over to the stadium. We eventually find our way to Gate A, which was not easy for people who didn't really know where they were going yet. And when we turn the corner to Gate A, we see a handful of tents. And there were some people, it was probably 7:30, maybe 8 in the morning, maybe a little earlier than that, but there were people starting to tear down their tents and start to pack up and get ready for the game. And there were probably 15 to 20 people there. So we found a spot near a gate, and we sat there, and thankfully somebody came up to us and started talking to us. I'm pretty sure his name was Brad. It's been a little while, so I don't remember perfectly. But he informed us that we were standing in a section that it's not part of where you go in to get a ticket and can sit in a section. It was, I think, the bag check area. So he informed us where we should go stand, what section we'll be in, and they really showed us the ropes. And we started talking to them, and they informed us that what they did was they come out Friday afternoon. They would bring a grill, they bring tents, they go out and they just 15 to 20 people, they hang out, they have a good time, and they camp out, and then the next morning they're front row for the game. So we decided that seemed like a cool idea. So we did that for the next couple games. We got ourselves a tent, we got the body paint to do all that fun stuff. And then the Ohio State game happened. And after we beat Minnesota, we then went on the road to Northwestern, and we beat Northwestern on the road in that last second play to Derek Williams. And then we start to hear wind that college game day is coming, which meant at that time cold pizza was coming.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Now First Take on ESPN.
Woody Page, Skip Bayless.
Yeah.
We get wind that they're coming as well. And we also get wind that this is probably going to be a little bit more popular, the camping out. So the group of us, all the friends that we had made at this point, we were texting, and we decided everyone's going to walk by or drive by the stadium throughout the day, every day, just to make sure, so that if somebody else shows up, then we go. Somebody showed up Sunday. So we got over there Sunday, and I would say about Monday afternoon, it turned into something that nobody could have expected. And you had hundreds of people lining up. And at this point, there was no organization. You go on the Nittanyville website right now, it's organized. You got to register your tent on a online program.
It's very thorough.
It's so organized. There was no need for that at this point. So there was nothing like that. And these upperclassmen, seniors and juniors, they on the fly set up a little table, got notebooks out, got duct tape, and basically, as people showed up to set up their tent and to sit somewhere, they went up to this registration table. They told them who they were. They got a name. They got a group. We told them what section they were in based on their age and what was going to be closest to front row at that point in time. And they told them to literally write with duct tape on their tent SD7 or SC4, whatever they were going to be. Right. And it was probably one of the craziest kind of fly by the seat of your pants moments I've ever been a part of, where these guys had no idea that they were going to need to do this, and they were prepared and ready, and they got it done. And it was incredible. But that first week, that Ohio State week, was so much fun. And I mean, you had terrible weather, which nobody should have been out there. It was raining all day Friday and most of the day Saturday, and it was cold, but you still had hundreds upon hundreds of people. I think now they said they estimate there was at least well into the hundreds, if not close to 1,000 people were up there at some point during the week. But it was so much fun. We could party. There's still videos online of the recycling bin drum line late at night on Friday night. It was a good time. And then obviously the game worked out well. And I would say that most people were not expecting to continue necessarily, that this was more of a one-off. And then, and I hate to give credit to somebody from this school, but then Kirk Herbstreit made the very infamous comment, I think it was during halftime, which he stated something to the effect of, "That's the best student section in the country. Those kids are crazy."
Yeah.
And it exploded from there.
The interesting thing for me, we mentioned you were first getting on campus in 2005. That was right around the time things started to improve for the Penn State football team.
Yep.
For those that recall, the very late 90s, the early 2000s were rough. People were calling for Joe Paterno to either step down or be outright fired. There's some very meager seasons. 2005 was the beginning of the resurgence, and you could point to 2004 as well. But shortly thereafter, it's the Orange Bowl game in 2006 against Florida State, which is a milestone moment in the history of Penn State football and the resurgence, as I mentioned, of Penn State football, to the point that, I talked about you started in 2005. When I was putting in applications to get to campus by 2007, the number of applications had just about doubled because of the success of Penn State. So, not saying that my grades were absolutely mind blowing or anything, but I had to look at a branch campus in Penn State Altoona, which leads me to my first experience with you in Paternoville, now Nittanyville, is that because I was a freshman and because I was at a branch campus, you guys gave me the graveyard shift. Can you explain the graveyard shift?
So on Saturday morning, somebody sleeps out. And somebody was there every night that we were camping out. And the idea is that you were supposed to have somebody there at all times during the day.
Yes.
Obviously, that's not feasible during classes, but you did the best that you could. But the worst shift was typically Saturday morning, because somebody would sleep there, but then they would get relieved so they could go home, maybe rest a little bit, get changed, get ready to stay up there. And depending on how long it was until game, if it was a noon game or if it was a 8 o'clock
manageable
game.
If it was a noon game.
Yeah, if it was an 8 o'clock at night game, the graveyard shift got a lot worse. And that was the person who was supposed to go up and relieve the person who was sleeping out, help them tear down the tent and pack everything up. And then the person who slept out, they would drive home, and the graveyard person would be there for the rest of the day. And that was
on concrete.
Yeah.
On concrete.
Yeah. And that, maybe 7, 8 a.m. in the morning, you'd have to be there.
I'm sorry. Is that what you remember?
I don't know.
I'm thinking 4 a.m.
No,
I remember
no.
4 a.m.
You had to relieve someone at 4 a.m.?
I remember being dropped off by, I don't know who, one of our friends at 4 o'clock in the morning to relieve somebody. So somebody I think had to go to a class or something like that. So it was an understandable situation, but I don't believe the game was until like 3:30 in the afternoon. I'm blanking on what game it was, but it was a long shift.
Oh, that's
and
horrible.
I think, yeah, well, you guys were horrible. But one of the bright spots
you still talk
was
to us.
there was one gentleman there who will remain nameless, and I don't believe he was even in school. I think he was too old to be in school, but he just hung out with a lot of students, so he was of drinking age. So I remember being there at God knows what hour in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, bleary-eyed because I was like trying to sleep and didn't time anything well. Mind you, I'd driven from Altoona to State College to do this.
Yeah.
And this gentleman is standing there with Lion's Head beer, if you've ever had it.
Oh, yeah.
Lion's Head beer bottles. And then he had those little chocolate donuts that he would put on the neck of the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So he would work on the donut as he drank his beer. It was really remarkable. So I'm just sitting there, my first time ever doing the graveyard shift, just being completely astonished at what I was seeing from Paternoville. It was really something.
Oh, I remember, I'll say his first name is Mark, but I won't go into what his nickname was.
Now, you talked about the website for Nittanyville. It is very thorough, as you talked about. There's rules and regulations. There's signing up. There's rules and regulations for trash can football now, which, like, you were kind of alluding to the beginning of that, but it's just there's a lot of organization. There's a whole club around it. People get voted and elected into different positions. Different classes are represented. So it's gotten more organized, and that's inevitable with time. But also, if you read the history of Nittanyville, according to the website, credit is given to one person in particular named Dan Clark for having coined the nickname Paternoville. Can you corroborate that story?
So I don't specifically remember who came up with the name of Paternoville, but he may have. I don't remember specifically. I know he was the first person to create a sign that said Paternoville, and he hung it. But to all of us who had been up there for a while, we regarded the upperclassmen and the guys that I talked about who were organized that first night of Ohio State, Jeff, Bill, Brad, Mike, a lot of those guys, I'm not going to say their last names, but a lot of those guys, they were fantastic. Jeff was regarded by us as the mayor of Paternoville. And he was the unspoken leader that we all look to. And I remember when the university, my sophomore year, started to get involved, and they wanted the organization, they wanted the club, they wanted us to have to talk with them, and them to be able to talk with us, so they could go back and forth with rules and regs and all that fun stuff. We obviously went to that. We had our representatives go to that and be a part of that as well. But there were some of the things that we didn't necessarily work with the university directly on. I remember they wanted to do a very specific way of giving out the tickets, and they wanted to change it. They wanted to change where all the gates were. They wanted to move it around because
I remember that. Yeah, that's right.
If you looked at the time, it was strange, but if you looked at where the gates were, where you would go in, because it was, you have a ticket, but the ticket didn't do anything other than say you were a freshman, sophomore, or a junior or a senior. And you walk in with your ticket and you go to a specific counter or a specific booth for a section, and they would give you a seat, a row, and a seat in that section. So the university wanted to change it where it was in order from right to left or left to right, how the actual sections were, because that wasn't how it was initially. And the stadium people had gotten that from the university, and we had heard that from the university, but it was kind of interesting because that morning of one of the games, whenever they tried to enact this, stadium people brought in about 5 or 6 of us. We walked it. We were on the field about 4 or 5 hours before the game, talking with the stadium coordinators, and they're like, "Do you guys want to do this?" And we're like, "We already have this organized where we know."
Way ahead of you, bud. But thanks for letting us on the field. Yeah.
They're like, "Do you want to go with what the university's doing, or do you want to stick with what you've done?" We're like, "We want to stick with what we've done because we've told people where to expect their gate, their booth, what number stanchion they need to go through, and it's just going to be very confusing and very disorganized if we change it now, especially mid-season." So it was things like that where the university had some rules and regulations like that we absolutely followed. Like, for example, we couldn't lock things to the actual garage door gates at gate A or put anything up against them. Funny story, somebody who may be credited with certain things may have locked his his tent to the gate and wasn't there for a couple days, and the cops cut his lock and took his tent. Maybe, I don't know. And things like that. We obviously followed the university rules and regulations with that, but there were just certain things where it wasn't fully feasible, and the university wasn't in the trenches like a lot of us were to know what was the right moves on everything. But from what it was when we started, which was a bunch of friends hanging out, and people had been doing this back 10 years plus prior to when I started in 05. Right. And these people it was fun. There was no regulations. It was 15 kids hanging out. They brought a grill. They maybe had a few beverages, but they enjoyed themselves. And the police didn't bother them because it was 15 kids that didn't cause any issues. The university didn't care because, once again, there were no issues. So it was just so pure and so fun. And I don't think anybody could have ever imagined that it would have exploded so quickly into what it became and what it is now. But obviously they've done a great job organizing it and getting it in a more, just in a better way, in a more professional way than we had it, but we did our best.
Yeah, without trying to sound like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino, get off my lawn. Yeah. It sounds like they've made some appropriate changes. Can you explain to me how one might outfit the inside of these tents? Because, again, these are students who are not exactly throwing around a lot of money and are usually coming from dorms or, modest apartments to then outfit these tents.
Absolutely. So you learn by mistakes on how to do this.
That's life. Yeah.
The Ohio State game was a fantastic way of learning these mistakes because that Ohio State game, the weather was awful. We So I remember we had 2 tents for that week, and I was in one of the tents, literally sleeping on a chair because the ground was so wet, and I was sitting on the chair. And I remember one of my friends came in at about 3 a.m. in the morning, opened the tent, woke me up, and he wanted to go to the college game day set. And he said, "Hey, can I borrow your chair?" And I said, "You mean the one I'm sitting on currently?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "No." But the best way to do it was you need to have multiple tarps. You had to have the tarp underneath to kind of keep water from really pooling into the tent. You had to have the tarp over top and have it situated correctly so the runoff didn't go underneath the tent when it rained. You wanted typically to have something underneath your air mattress. And then if you've ever slept on an air mattress outside, you learn very quickly, no matter what you have on this air mattress, you need a blanket, relatively thick one, in between where you're sleeping and the air mattress, because otherwise the air mattress will draw all the heat from you into itself, and you will be very cold very quickly. So we learned that. We learned that quite quickly. But the tents usually there wasn't much inside of them, but during the day, you'd pull out some chairs. The first year we had grills, but we weren't allowed to after that. Open flames and all that stuff, propane.
Yeah.
I can't imagine why, but
A little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the most extravagant thing? Like, did you ever see like a small TV or anything inside one of these?
I think somebody had one. I don't remember. I think somebody had back then you had the battery powered like TVs with the antenna that could catch signals. We don't have that anymore. Analog doesn't really exist anymore, but
I could just imagine somebody, because back then, you probably had the NCAA football game on whatever platform, so I could just visualize some kid in a tent with a TV and playing video games.
Yeah, and we played Scrabble, we played board games. People would do their homework. I mean, during the week, it was a pretty productive area. On the weekends, it became more of a party and a lot more fun.
Are you a fan of rivalries? Are you a fan of smack talk? Do you like to stand out from the crowd at tailgates? If so, head over to Smack Apparel and check out what their team is geared up for this football season. Their Let There Be White tee is the perfect gear for those famous whiteout games at Beaver Stadium. Or get straight to the point with the worst tee for all the Ohio State haters out there. Smack Apparel makes the gear that'll have everyone asking where you got it. They have the must-have tees for all your teams, including pro football, baseball, basketball. Every fan is covered. Head over to their website, smackapparel.com, and use the promo code PAYDIRT at checkout for 10% off. Again, that's smackapparel.com, promo code PAYDIRT at checkout. Why wear boring when you can wear smack? Flat should describe your TV, not your TV sound. Experience your entertainment like never before with the new Sonos Ray. This compact and easy-to-use soundbar puts you at the center of shows, movies, games, and more with crisp highs and precisely balanced bass. Breeze through setup with help from the Sonos app. You can even use your own remote for control. And when the TV is off, stream music, radio, podcasts, and audiobooks from all your favorite services. Visit Sonos.com. That's Sonos.com to learn more. And for those that don't know, that area of Gate A at Beaver Stadium is right up against a pretty good parking lot. And what I mean by like pretty good parking lot, and then A, it's in very good order, and B, it's where more high-end or high-paying alumni pay to park. So you've got a lot of families, you've got a lot of people who are more well off, and really not people who are getting crazy. If you're going to go crazy at a Penn State tailgate, you're probably going to go to the IM fields or some cow pasture in a distance where it's a little less expensive. There's a little more space to spread out. But the parking lot that is right next to Gate A is these more, well-off people, I guess, and families. So to then have a horde of students in tents just feet away, was that ever awkward?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think
Great.
so. Anytime any alumni ever came up to us, it was, "This is awesome. You guys are awesome. This is so cool what you guys are doing." Like, I mean, alumni usually didn't bring us much food, but players and the team and the coaches would bring food every once in a while. It was usually one night a week where somebody would come up with Damon's barbecue or something like a pizza from Canyon or something like that.
So good.
And then the best visitor, and I forgot to mention this with the cold pizza thing, the best visitor that we ever had though was that first Ohio State game when cold pizza was there. You literally, before the show, you had Woody Page and a camera crew going in and out of tents at like 6:30 in the morning and going into people's tents and hanging out with them. And it was one of the coolest, funniest things. And then of course, during the commercial breaks of cold pizza, this is back before they put those protective screens up behind the sets. People
Yes.
were tossing beers to Woody Page, and he was drinking them during the commercial breaks on cold pizza on Friday morning at about
I
8
always
a.m.
knew I liked Woody Page.
It was fantastic. The crowd loved him.
Am I correct that Joe Paterno would bring pizzas
Absolutely.
to Paternoville? Yeah, I remember that from
Yeah.
years ago, but I remember seeing that.
He would come up,
It
players
was
would come up. Our group was named after Derek Williams, the very talented freshman of '05 as well. And he
the
came
News
up and
Express.
he took pictures with us. He came up a few times. All the players came up and would bring food or just say hi. It was a ton of fun.
Now, obviously, this is all to get into the vaunted Penn State student section. And as I mentioned, PAYDIRT, we're about all things Penn State football, and we're biased, but I would say Penn State student section is bar none the most active, the loudest in college football. I think you and I have gone to enough games where you see maybe some poor representation in the student section. And you're like, oh, they should all be in here already before kickoff. You see them trickling in late, but for the most part, when the students are in, they are loud. For those that have never experienced that, what is the Penn State student section like?
It's just so intoxicating, and I think that's probably the best way to describe that first Ohio State game in '05, because like I said, I don't think people expected this to be a regular thing in their repertoire. I think our group had decided we were going to do it for a while. I don't think everybody who did it decided, I'm going to do this on a regular basis, but it was just so crazy. You were screaming, you were yelling. I mean, it took you 3 days after the game to get your voice back. You were screaming constantly. There was no moment where you would be silent when we were on defense. You were screaming no matter what. And I mean, you had so many great chants. If there was a false start, you got the us chants where we point to ourselves and congratulate ourselves for that. But it was just, there's so many different things, but it was so much fun, and it was intoxicating. Being down there, being on the field, being so close to the field, and you just hear how loud it is. You can't hear anything around you. You can't hear the PA announcer describing the play. You're just screaming. It's just loud. It was so amazing. And then you do you have Zombie Nation, you got the White Stripes. Those songs go, and you could almost feel the stadium shake. And
You can definitely feel the stadium shake as someone who's
well,
been up there with you.
when you're down on the lower levels on the front row, you can't feel it as much. I have been to games since graduating where you're a little higher up, and you can absolutely feel it shake, and you're wondering about the structural integrity in that moment. But yeah, we're both still here, so it's built well.
Well, I'll never forget, because I wasn't a Penn State student yet, so I'm blanking what age I was, but it was when Tom Bahali put Troy Smith on his head.
That was
So
05.
you guys were in the front row. So you guys had snuck me into the student section from wherever I was sitting. And I remember watching that from the end zone with you guys in the front row, and just the place exploded. And it wasn't long after that I remember you turning to me and you're like, you're going to want to get out of here because everybody starts pushing to rush the field.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what's going on here? So I needed to bail out of there. But it's a really amazing circumstance, especially when you're front row and you've got the Nittany Lion right there. You've got the cheerleaders, the majorettes, everything right there. It's right in front of you. It is
Hmm.
so cool.
Oh, and it was it was so much fun being down there. And then you had the game you're talking about. Yeah, I think we got you out of there quickly, but the rest of us, we got pinned to the point where we couldn't leave the way we were supposed to. And the cops were not letting anybody jump the railing and get on the field. We literally had policemen on horses in front of us staring at us. And when they realized we couldn't go anywhere, they let us jump down and then immediately exit. But as we walk out, we see people who had gotten caught trying to rush the field, and they're sitting there and they're crying because they got pepper sprayed in the eyes, and we're just sitting there like, yeah, we're just leaving. Please don't spray us.
Are you looking for undeniably good hair and beard care? Then Maestro's Classic is perfect for you. Maestro's has beard washes, beard oils, beard butters, plus hair gels and pomades. It's one brand for every man. Visit maestrosclassic.com. That's Maestros classic.com and use our promo code PAYDIRT15 PAYDIRT15 at checkout for 15% off your order. Maestro's Classic, crafting a better you. The student section is really unbelievable. Like it really makes Beaver Stadium come to life. It's why the whiteout is so special. And I guess you could also say with the advent of Paternoville and Nittanyville was also the advent of the whiteout. What were those early days like?
Well, I'm not going to go that far because the whiteout definitely, there were some whiteout games prior to 2005. And they were, from what I've seen, they were great. I wasn't a part of them, but they were fantastic. But there was definitely whiteout before '05. But like I said, there's something about you're there all week. You're in terrible weather. Everybody's still pushing through this terrible weather. Nobody went home. Nobody packed up their tent because it was flooded. People just dealt with it. They just kept going. And you get Friday. If you went to class Friday, you were definitely in the minority because everybody was out at the stadium hanging out, having a good time at the set, whatever they were doing. And then we hung out at the stadium that night. I think there's still some videos on YouTube of the trash can drum line and all the songs and the singing and all the fun that we were having that night. And then you go all day standing out there, 1,000 people crashed in around gate A, screaming, yelling all together all day long, and you're just so amped up that it just builds everything together. And nobody left because the weather was terrible and it was cold. That might have been one of the coldest games we ever did in the 3 years that we camped out there and we did the games. That might have been probably the coldest temperature-wise game that we ever did. But it was just, when you do that, you build that camaraderie, you build that environment, and you have to go all in and you have to scream at the top of your lungs. And then you see the way that game progressed. It was, obviously a defensive battle. You had the Calvin Lowry pick. You had Derek Williams' first home touchdown. Unfortunately, it was on the far end zone from where we were. But you had those plays, and then, like you said, the Tamba Hali flipping Troy Smith on his head and Scott Paxton recovering that fumble to finish off the game, and that place just going nuts. It was just incredible.
Brings back memories. It gives me chills thinking about it. So
if you can't tell, I remember it a little bit.
Just a little bit. Well, listen, Ross, I appreciate the walk down memory lane. Enjoy the rest of the 2022 football season for Penn State. We're recording this a couple days before the Central Michigan game, so hopefully that goes well. And then it seems like this team could be on to something special this year. What's your feel thus far?
I feel like they've gotten a little bit better every week, and that's kind of what you're looking for, right? You're looking for improvement. You got new guys in new positions, so you want them to continually progress. And you got new coaches. You got Manny Diaz, and you kind of, watching the defense, I kind of feel like we're seeing more and more of what a Manny Diaz defense is every single week. we're getting that pass rush. We've seen Chop Robinson all year. We saw Adisa Isaac get his hands in there a few times last week. That secondary is playing well. Big Brown had that huge pick, that great play where he picked the ball off last week. And offensively, I mean, it's glaring for everybody to see. The missing thing that we've had for the last 2 years is that running game. And I mean, Sean Clifford doesn't have to be a hero every game when he has running backs who can hold their own and move the ball that way. And I think if our running game can be kind of what it was last week all year long, I think our offense will be scary, because then Sean doesn't feel like he has to force the ball into tight spaces, and maybe he can cut down on some of those mistakes that he's made in the past.
Could be onto something exciting, as I mentioned this before the Central Michigan game, but hopefully things are positive in October. It's certainly going to be a very difficult
Tough
stretch
October.
there with Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio State. It's a rough stretch, and I'm not overlooking that home game against Northwestern at all. So, Ross, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate some of the history and the origins of Nittanyville, Paternoville, and we hope you'll all join us next time on the next edition of PAYDIRT. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back on ESPN Radio State College on Mondays and Fridays from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern for the remainder of the Penn State football season. If you want to check out the podcast version of this show presented by the Believe Network, this episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, let us know what you think of the show on Twitter at ESPN Radio 1037, at McGloin-QB11, and at Tom Hannafin. PAYDIRT is presented by BetOnline and by Funk Brewing. Thanks again, everyone, and join us next week for more PAYDIRT.